It's Friday. Here lunch hour, as always, powered by beajesuit.org. I am Father Michael Rossman, and I am joined by one of the new Jesuit scholastics, Emmanuel Arenas. Welcome to Jesuit Lunch Hour, Emmanuel.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Emmanuel, could you say a little bit about your background? Kind of where did you grow up, where did you go to school, and then what led you to become a Jesuit?
Sure. So I'm from Park Ridge, Illinois, which is northwest suburb of Chicago. Went to Marquette University, studied finance there, and then worked for a couple years after doing fixed income institutional trading as a sales assistant. And then I started discerning the Jesuits. I really started reflecting on some of my experiences at Marquette, some of my really wonderful friends that have cultivated a desire for spiritual conversation and just started discerning. So after 2 years of discernment, I entered the Jesuits in 2018.
Great. And some of our viewers would have familiarity with what the Jesuit novitiate is.
Sure.
But can you say a little bit about what that is? And perhaps you could touch upon some of the particularly meaningful experiences of the novitiate.
Sure, yeah. So the novitiate is the first 2 years of formation as a Jesuit. You do a variety of different experiments there. You grow in prayer, you grow in community. So some of the experiments that we did at the novitiate were the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, which is a 30-day silent retreat where you come to know Christ and God more intimately. And it's a very personal trip with your spiritual director and very special, very special. And then as well, we do another big experiment called pilgrimage, which is, it sounds pretty amazing. It's 30 days where all you have is $35, and you're encouraged not to talk to family, friends, and other Jesuits. You're supposed to seek people out, ask people for help, for food, for shelter, for 30 days. No cell phone, nothing like that. So very special time, very special time. And then some other experiments were this past year, I did a long experiment in Detroit, working with the homeless population there, offering services like laundry, showers, clothing, those kind of things, a couple meals a day. And a whole other bunch of stuff, but that could take a while.
Great. And for those viewers, okay, Jesuits, we always have to be special in our language. So we use this, language of experiment, which sounds like a chemistry lab, but
that's right.
Really, basically we mean just various experiences, right? So you talked about the spiritual exercises, this 30-day silent retreat. You talked about the pilgrimage as well, where you're kind of relying on the goodness of people you meet along the way for a month. What were some particularly powerful moments during those experiments or experiences?
Yeah. I really think something that I took away from both those experiences was a greater devotion to Mary, which she's been very important in my life. I kind of had this devotion to her early on in life with the model that my mom has been. I'm Mexican, so we have a great reverence for Our Lady of Guadalupe, and my mom has always been someone who's exemplified humility and charity in such a beautiful way. And so during the spiritual exercises, Ignatius has you encounter Christ and Mary in a lot of these dialogues. So you're having conversations with Mary and Jesus, and you're placed in these scenarios in the gospel where you're able to converse with Mary spiritually. So I was able to build a relationship there that I found very beautiful. And then later on, when I went to pilgrimage, I devoted my pilgrimage to Mary, specifically the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and making my way all the way up to Champion, Wisconsin, where there was a Marian apparition. So I remember specifically pilgrimage being a challenging time. You're very lonely, you're meeting people, new people every day. You kind of long for a familiar face, and Mary was that familiar face for me. So I remember going to her and having her accompany me every day during that time.
Yeah. Great. And so, during the spiritual exercises, you would have the method of Ignatian contemplation, where you're
yes.
with, your imagination, you're placing yourself in various gospel scenes. As you were doing that, what stood out to you about Mary? What was particularly striking and attractive about Mary for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first, I thought of the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Hmm.
She has this beautiful expression on her face, an expression of humility that I think was very attractive to me. It's like, wow, like look at how content and humble she is in that picture. I started reflecting and thinking about the impact she's had on a lot of lives of the saints. So I think of Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Dominic, Saint Ignatius himself, and her role in establishing these large religious orders and their devotion to her. I remember thinking on the exercises like, I'm not perfect, and neither is my prayer. And I imagine Mary taking my prayer, polishing them up a little bit, and going to her son and presenting it to her son. I kept thinking, like, how much I love my own mother. Well, how much does Jesus love his mother that he's willing to hear what she has to say? So I thought about that all the time. And in the spiritual exercises, there's this three-person colloquy that Ignatius recommends. And you start with Mary. You go to Mary first with your prayer. And then you with Mary go to Jesus. And then you with Jesus and Mary go to God the Father. And so there's this kind of development in prayer as you progress through the exercises with Mary.
Correct. You've mentioned your own mother a couple times. How has your devotion to Mary kind of interacted with your relationship with your own mother?
Oh yeah, she's been fantastic. She's put up with me and my three brothers for a long time, so I'm very grateful for her. And I think what really was important for me on the exercises when I was thinking about and imagining myself at the foot of the cross with Mary. I imagine Mary looking at her son and being like, "Oh my gosh, I just want him to be, happy. I just want him to be good and healthy and look at him, he's going through so much." And I immediately thought back to all these different experiences in my life where I've stumbled, where I've really struggled, and my mom has always been there. She couldn't get me off the cross because I was oftentimes ignorant and wanted to push back, but she was there, she was present, and because of that, when I see her, I see the Blessed Virgin Mary, and it really helps me feel close to Mary in a lot of ways.
Great, great. As you were saying that, my own mother just left a comment on the video. Hey, mom. That's great. And I think that's actually a really wonderful example. Sometimes I think when guys are considering joining the Jesuits, perhaps there's a fear, or perhaps the fear is particularly prominent among their parents and so forth, that by joining the Jesuits we're leaving our families or
Oh
something
no.
like that. But oftentimes, and I'm interested in your own experience of this, oftentimes our bonds to our own birth families can be strengthened.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I've called my mom a lot more now as a Jesuit than I did when I was in college or when I was working in Milwaukee. I think I just miss her, and I know how important she's been in my own vocation, and I know that she's going to help me cultivate it as I go along. So
Great, great. And so you talked about these significant prayer experiences with Mary during the spiritual exercises, but most people cannot take off 30 days to do a silent retreat like that. And even for Jesuits, it's not, at least in my own experience, maybe you are very different, but in my own experience, it's more difficult to have such powerful Ignatian contemplations on a day-to-day basis. But prayer, of course, is an important part of our lives. So perhaps you could say a little bit about what does devotion to Mary look like in your day-to-day life today, kind of outside of that retreat context?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that I always use to help me get into the mode of prayer is the rosary. So I start with that, and the rosary is very nice because it's very meditative, and there's not a lot of thinking that you have to do along with it. It's very imaginative. So you go through the mysteries of Jesus's life, And that's what Mary wants. Mary wants you to get to know her son a little better. And so I go through the rosary when I'm walking to class, when I'm, when I'm anxious, when there's a lot going on, I tend to go straight to the rosary, and it helps me ease into a state of prayer. It doesn't. Now prayer doesn't always have to be profound. I think we have a misconception where something amazing has to happen in prayer, or a revelation, and that's not always the case. I think oftentimes when I go to prayer, it's a restful time. It's a time to recollect myself, to just find some time for quiet and peace. And that's also as important as it is when you have these wonderful revelations at times.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think that's really hopeful that I mean, what you're describing seems to be, pretty accessible to normal people most of
Yeah.
the time. Perhaps, some people might have an idea that, people who have a particular devotion to Mary, tend to be older women. I love older women, but perhaps you could speak to perhaps why a devotion to Mary is relevant for anyone.
Absolutely. I think it's very. I found it very important for me today, especially when there's so much going on, and your mind can run oftentimes, and you become anxious. And as I was mentioning before, the rosary is a great way to just kind of take it easy and go through it, and find that time to recollect yourself. It's a time to connect with your inner self, and draw from that, and experience that, and kind of dwell in that for a little bit. And the rosary does take a while. It takes about 15 minutes or so. So that takes those 15 minutes out of your day where you can just sit there and enjoy that time with Mary, knowing that she's guiding you and she's leading you to Christ in a beautiful way. Yeah, so I find it very, very helpful today.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Emmanuel, you took vows as a Jesuit just about a month ago, and now you are continuing your Jesuit formation. Could you say a little bit about where you are and what you're doing right now?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm at St. Louis University getting an MA in philosophy for ministry. And so that entails of taking a couple classes here at SLU, and then also working at a ministry site on the weekends. So I work at Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish, beautiful Hispanic parish. Just started there last week, so very excited to grow in that. And then also participating on campus with student activities. So there's student masses on Monday nights. There's Java with the Jesuits that's popular here at SLU, where you just hang out with Jesuits and have a cup of coffee, get to know a couple guys, and just have some awesome spiritual conversations. So trying to get more involved there. And then the community here is fantastic. So there's about 30 guys or so that you can just talk with for hours.
Yeah, and can you describe your community setup, and also who are those roughly 30 guys? Are they just from the Midwest, or who lives with you?
Sure. So we live within 4 houses next to each other, because there's a bunch of us. So we're all able to see each other from time to time. So one house is like the chapel house, the other house is the dining room house, the social house, and then the meeting house. So where we have meetings. Yeah. So there's a lot going on, and it's not all Midwest guys. There's only 4 of us from the Midwest that entered into the house this year. A lot of guys from the East Coast, from the West Coast, from the Southern Province. So there's a diverse group here, which is fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, we oftentimes like asking guys just what piece of advice, what little nugget of wisdom might you offer to someone who is making life decisions, someone who is in discernment of some kind in their life?
Sure. I think I think back to when I was discerning entering the Jesuits. What was really important for me was reflecting on the lives of the saints. I would say there's always a saint that we can relate to. For me, I felt very close to Saint Ignatius and Saint Francis of Assisi, but I would say choose a saint or read about a saint that really inspires you and understands you personally, and ask for that saint to pray with you. Ask for that saint to pray with you, and walk with that saint, and see how they've handled or experienced different things that you're experiencing, and draw from that beautiful wisdom. I think that was very critical in my vocation, and I'm sure it would be helpful for other people too.
Amen. What great advice. And yeah, hearing you talk about the saints, hearing you talk about Our Lady, and particularly, Our Lady of Guadalupe, I'm thinking about when we first met each other. I was
Yeah.
newly ordained and working at a different Our Lady of Guadalupe, and I remember
Yeah.
visited me in the church basement as I was trying to direct this camp for children. And it's wonderful to see you, now as a vowed Jesuit. So, Emmanuel, I wish you very well as you continue with your Jesuit formation right now in St. Louis. And thanks so much for joining us today on Jesuit Lunch Hour.
Thank you, Father Rossman. It's good to see you.
All right. We will be back with another interesting Jesuit next week. Have a great weekend, everyone, and God bless.
Take care.